Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I hope all of you are having a wonderful time just mingling and networking and learning from each other. Today's panel discussion is building resilience. How do we build resilience? We do that by overcoming big challenges, by solving big problems, by surmounting personal, family, and even global crises like the one that we've all experienced just 2 years ago. Um, my first question is for all of you. Um, just coming out of the pandemic in the last 2 years, what were some of your biggest takeaways as a senior leader, as an investor, or even as a mentor? Maybe my first question will go out to Anna, and then we can just go down the line.
Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. And I've been literally coming out of this whole COVID. I thought I, got out of the worst stage of my career, but the last week has been, or few weeks, and especially the last week has been so tumultuous. We have been literally thinking about how to be super agile and managing my team's expectation on how to manage the rest of the organization. One of the things that we're going through right now, talking about resilience, is learn how to actually cut without being, and literally how to optimize our organization to last us the next 12 to 18 months. And so resilience is actually being able to make very difficult decisions without having to go through that exercise again, that emotional turmoil. For us, it's been a huge exercise the last couple of weeks, and I can't tell you, I smile a lot, but inside I'm crying. So it's a lot to handle, but we will go into it. But right now, I think most of us founders are actually working on the spreadsheet day in and day out, and that's fact. It's literally how to optimize our organization and rationalize our operations.
Maybe if you could just go a little bit to your company as well, just so that everyone
I think most of you guys know me, right? Okay, I don't need to introduce myself.
Okay, Juliet.
Hi, I'm Juliet. Introduction. Okay, so I'm the CFO and Group President of Carsome. We are a used car e-commerce platform. It's a mobility company that went through 2 years of almost no mobility. So we've been through quite a lot. And on a personal level, this is the first time I'm in an operating role. I was an investor, first hedge fund, then VC before joining Carsome in 2019. And really almost 3 months after I joined, we went into a complete lockdown. So I think a lot of learnings on the personal level, on the operator level, and sometimes I switch on my investor hat as well and look at the macroeconomics and about what's happening. The biggest takeaway by far for me is knowing that anything is possible. What you think is not possible became possible over the past 2 years and more recently. Everyone in the world wears a mask becomes possible. Locking people in their own homes for 2 years is possible. I think it's really sobering to see some of the major trends. Like I thought was not gonna reverse. Like globalization is reversing. A lot of trends you believe that's just gonna be permanently there are changing, and use that to examine your business model and question all your assumptions and stretch the limit of scenarios to stress test your business model, especially when you just are getting started. So I'll say that's the biggest takeaway by far.
Maybe just can keep with you. I mean, my understanding, especially for car marketplaces, especially during COVID, was that the customer touch point is very important for the automotive marketplace because you got to inspect your cars. And that requires people to go out. And during the lockdown situation, I can imagine everyone's locked down at home. They don't know if they're going to keep their jobs. Would you consider that to be one of the lower parts, during the last 2 years? Or if you could just kind of illustrate a little bit more in terms of the challenges you were facing and how you guys kind of overcame that.
Yeah, a lot. I think when I talked about like stretching the limit, it's not when you're planning for 2023, it's not revenue down 10%, it's zero revenue. Like we've been through 2 months of close to zero revenue because there was a complete lockdown. Nobody's allowed to go out to, get their cars inspected because it's not essential. And ownership transfer agency was not open. So even when we do inspect the car and make the transaction, the ownership can't actually transfer. So it was a complete shutdown of all mechanisms and the economy. So and solving that actually involves a lot of innovation and really creative problem solving. And the problem was not to get a car inspected, but also to how do we protect our employees in that environment? Like, how do we make sure when our frontliners are protected in terms of PPE? There was a huge shortage of PPE. So, like, we had to call our investors one by one. Do they have masks? Do they have, like, gloves to bring to the country out of China? So, very, very interesting conversations we never thought that we would have with our shareholders happen during that time. But that's just one small example. And like today, we're going through a different kind of crisis now. And I think in terms of magnitude, it's just different. It's not smaller. So
It's way bigger.
way bigger. Yeah. So I think like really this is a time to ask very existential questions about what problem you're solving and who is your customer and what's your focus and what's your core competitive edge in this very volatile world.
Maybe Leanne, keeping in line with, keeping, your team, your employees safe, like mentally, emotionally, financially.
Hi, everyone. Thanks, Kristie. I think, so firstly, this kind of, I first want to acknowledge, right? It's a really tough week for everyone. And I think sometimes with the tech ecosystem, the tech startup ecosystem especially, it's always positive, right? People are generally, optimistic, they're positive. But during COVID and during the pandemic, we all went through really, really, really tough times. And as a founder, you always go through really tough times. And as a founder, you kind of go on this roller coaster almost daily, right? You wake up and then it's like, yay, everything is great. By 10 a.m., oh my goodness, everything is falling apart. And then by 12, everything is up again. And every day you're going through this. And even for us, right, as She Loves Tech, as a founder, I mean, we have our conference, right, that we've done for the last 2 days. This is just one out of the many, many, many things that we've done. The team has run global conferences. We've run 28 conferences in the last 2 months. We did a boot camp just last week. We ran our global finals. And then we're also doing our conference. And then tomorrow we're doing our team offsite. That's a lot of things. And we do a lot for very, very little, as founders do. And one of the things that my team just reminded me of is, as a founder, you kind of take a lot of responsibility and you say, okay, I'm going to do everything myself, right? You try to protect your team as much as possible. But sometimes when you do everything yourself, you get really overwhelmed and you get really, really, really stressed out. And that's not good on your team either, right? When you're in that place that you can't be at your top self. And so one of the biggest lessons that I learned was, and I'm still learning, is how to delegate more, how to trust more, how to be better at saying no to things.
Sui Ling,
Hi, everyone.
investor in this panel.
So I'm operating partner at Wavemaker and old enough to have seen every single crisis that has happened this century and even one crisis from the past century. So let me just tell you, you cannot control anything that is happening. You cannot control the Fed. You have no idea when Sam Bankman-Fried is going to blow up. You have no idea when all of a sudden Elon Musk says, I'm letting go of Tesla, I want to do Twitter. None of that you can control. But there's one thing you can control as founders. You can build a resilient business. And what does that mean? That means, going back to what Juliet says, focus on your customer, focus on your product, focus on your unit economics, focus on your profitability. Very old-fashioned word, guys. Profitability. Cash management. Very old-fashioned. But guess what? That's how you stay resilient. That's how you will go into the next decade. That's all you have to do, because those are the things that you can control, because it's your company. You're the founder. So this is something that I come from the school of hard knocks, so I've got to tell you that.
Yeah, maybe you could illustrate some experiences as well. I mean, during COVID, obviously you had a hand also in kind of overseeing the Wavemaker portfolio. I'm sure you have met a whole wide range of different founders of how they cope with crises. Any words of advice, perhaps, for founders or even for yourself, like coming out of this, were there maybe certain areas that you could have done better in being able to better support founders when they're going through a really tough time?
I'll have to say, we try to be honest with each other. Founders to us and us to founders. Because, the founders are the ones who know the business the best. You know 99% of the business. We are just sitting from the outside. What you have to convince us is you believe that this business can be turned around, can be, you strongly believe in your business model. But then again, if you don't believe it, if fundraising is the exercise, right, that helps you live to another day, then you have to be honest to yourself as well. I think that's really important. Don't lie to yourselves, right? Stay true. And then, because this is a long game, you guys are all young, right? And I cannot tell you, I went to a women's college in the 20th century, and I cannot tell you how happy I am to see so many women in tech. It was not like this when I was growing up in investment banking, where it was 90% men and 10% women. And in tech, it was exactly the same. So kudos to all of you.
Do you think there's a difference between male founders and female founders, especially when coping with crises?
Coping with crisis. I actually think sometimes, but not all the time, because I think founders, regardless of gender, tend to be very resilient by nature. But women do tend to take, as what Leanne was saying, you tend to take a lot more on yourselves. You tend to delegate less. You tend to internalize things a lot more. And that's what you need to learn from the guys, right? Don't internalize so much. Although, a lot of men also, they can't speak. So what I would say is that don't be afraid to ask for help, right? If you really can't solve it, it's okay. You first build a network of like-minded founders. So if you're a B2B company, go look for other B2B founders where you can at least share experiences that could be helpful when you encounter a crisis. And then go to your VC if you need help and say, this is what I need help with. Because, so for example, at Wavemaker, we've got 180 portfolio companies. We will never be able to, we're not mind readers, right? You have to come and say, look, I really need this. Can you help me? So don't be afraid to ask for help. Sometimes women are less prone to ask for help too.
Let's go round back to Anna and Juliet again. I mean, from a founder, CEO, senior leader point of view, I think one of the challenges for founders as well is, we talk about self-awareness, I think previously, when you're knee deep in, in a crisis, sometimes, and you did kind of caveat a little bit, sometimes founders are still in that stage of perhaps self-denial. Maybe they still think that things can work, but they're still fighting on. I don't know if any of you have ever been through something like that. How do you kind of snap out of that and take a step back and say, I need to look at things a bit differently, make some hard decisions when the time has come for you to make those really hard decisions?
I'll start. Can I just take a poll on how many of you are actually a founder in this room? Okay. How many of you are pre-product market fit? So all of those who raised your hands as founders, you're already post-product market fit? Okay, so most of you guys are early stage. And who are working for other companies or students? Okay, so about half. Because I want to make sure that what we're saying to you today is relevant to the audience. Obviously, all this hardship, most of you probably don't even care. You know, a lot of you either are here because, you know, some of us are not in a good predicament and we've been laid off, or we're looking for the next gig because we've been giving notice, or we're very, you know, motivated to start our own company. And actually, this period is the best time to start a company. And if you're pre-product market fit, it's even best time to actually A/B test your assumptions in the market. If you have a self-serve business model, that credit card model, even better, because companies won't spend that much. So for me, how do I snap out of stuff? I think it's fundamentally going back to your childhood, how you were raised. I was raised very differently, and I've never been boxed in by my family. I've never had a curfew growing up. I can stay out as late as I can. I can drink if I want to. But it was that responsibility that, you know, my parents gave me. And I actually immigrated from China to the US at a very young age. So that resiliency of actually blocking off bullying and discrimination and fighting for your worth and your, you know, existence is what created me. I already innately have that kind of grit and resilience. So I'm only sharing my personal journey because resilience and grit and toughness is not innate in everybody. And so how do I snap out of it? I've been living it every day since I was pretty much a child. So that's my version of how I snap out of it.
Can I just take one more poll? How many of you here are VCs or investors of any kind? All right, there are a few. So I think debating with your stakeholders who are a little bit less involved with the business, it's very, very interesting in good times, but it's very, very challenging is it's a soft word for it. It takes a lot of preparation. It takes a lot of conviction using data. So what Anna said about product market fit, about actually knowing what you were testing and, you know, how do you prove that your hypothesis works, backed by data, is extremely important. And being optimistic without data is not assuring. So I think what helps me is actually also switch on my VC head once in a while and say, like, okay, what if that was not true? How would I feel as an investor who knew nothing, almost nothing about what's going on in the business, just relying on the founder's judgment? And at the same time, the founder's not sharing with me what he or she may or may not know. So, and that's interesting. Like if a founder comes to you and say, I acknowledge I do not know this, you actually trust him or her more. So being very honest, being very transparent, especially in crisis, especially in difficult times, acknowledging things you do not have 100% conviction about, and communicating that and say, this I don't know, but I will do ABC to figure it out. That helps a lot, right? And you know, you run this argument with yourself as well. When you actually need to make a quick decision without all the information ready.
The same question back to the two founders again. I mean, sticking with, you know, managing stakeholders, you know, what was, perhaps maybe Anna can take this as well, like the most challenging part when it comes to managing stakeholders? Is it about skepticism, paranoia, communication, cultural barriers, even depending on the kind of investors that you have in your cap table? I mean, I don't know. Well, as a founder, I guess early on you had the chance to pick the kind of investors that you want. Maybe that's so for Juliet, she inherited everything. Maybe you could just kind of take us through that process as well.
So 2 types of stakeholders that in my organization, or 3, let's just say 3: employees, leadership, and then shareholders, investors, right? I report to the board. I have a boss or bosses, and whenever they call you and proactively call you, something is wrong. No board member ever calls proactively. Seldom do they, just to talk shits and giggles. They oftentimes call you because they're concerned. There's a relevant, crucial conversation to be had. And so that's where you're getting nervous. And recently, a lot of them have been managing their portfolio companies more proactively, and they're reaching out. So you just literally have to be extremely honest. There's no other way to claw back because you're going to ask them for more money. The second stakeholder is the leadership team. Are they resilient enough to make all these difficult decisions? And the term that Julia used was stress test, right? You're stress testing your leadership team. If they are not here to actually work with you to optimize the business, because the only thing we have control over in this downturn is our spreadsheet and our operations. So that's the only thing you have control over. You have no control over anything external. So then the other part is the employees. How do we share this bad news to them? Because we're going to make further cuts. I thought that we just emerged from COVID and we were going to kumbaya a little bit in the next couple of weeks in an offsite. And then now we're going to probably hold each other and cry, So how do you pivot from that kind of high to the very lowest low during this next few months? And how do you survive the next 12 months? And to deliver that news, as Julia was sharing with us in the break room, is that we have to teach our managers how to communicate effectively. Because rumors, and I tell you, there are a lot of gossip and rumors. And when people have never gone through a downturn, they will only talk. They will only spread rumors because it's so emotional. It's never my fault. I got laid off but it's not personal. I just want you guys to know it's not personal. None of this is personal. It's just a spreadsheet. If we don't exercise that kind of gutsy move to control our business and build a resilient business, we have nothing to show for it. We have no business to operate. So bear in mind that all the changes that you're going to make, either you think through how you're going to communicate this to your different stakeholders and how you're going to manage this downstream to the employees, because for us, bad news are going to come. And I'm publicly telling you guys this. I'm actually really scared about Asia right now because no one's talking about bad news. Nobody. You're going to see a lot of bad news coming, and it's unfortunate that right now it's actually, why does Asia not talk about failures and bad news? I'm going to make cuts. I'm sorry, to survive.
That was a very, very good summary, and including the baskets of stakeholders. And I think at the risk of repeating everything Anna just said, with shareholders, definitely transparency, especially in crisis, the frequency of communication need to be very, very proactive with what's happening, how you're managing it, and what's the result. I remember the first day of lockdown, 18th of March to 2020 in Malaysia. We sent out the night of the lockdown, we sent out email to all our shareholders and say there is a region-wide, there's country level lockdown. There's likely to be a region-wide lockdown. This is what we're doing, prioritizing employee safety, making sure the protocols are in place, taking stock of how much cash we have. These are the fourth is we're going to come out with a plan in a few days. And in the middle of that, we give a weekly update to all our shareholders about what's happening. And at the end of the first wave of lockdown, we had a summary and say, we're no longer going to update you on this track, but this is how we manage that period of time. I think that gives a lot of assurance. Don't make it very timely. Don't let concerns brew, because once the questions start to come, you're gonna be in firefighting mode, and it's not the most efficient use of your time. And again, the honesty and transparency as much just be very straightforward, acknowledge things you don't know. With leadership, I think we align everyone's kind of go on the why, like why we're doing this, acknowledging this is not going to be the first crisis. This is not the first crisis the company has been through. It's not going to be the last. And how the leadership responds and make decisions in crisis shows more about the company than what the results are. So like using that to align everyone's expectation, bring out the best in everyone. So it's not like end of the world, everyone, you're kind of left alone, but like there's a purpose in everything you're doing, even in a crisis, and probably even more. With employees, we've gone through a pretty public exercise, and it's really important for the leadership and for the management team to make those decisions fast, sooner rather than later, because it's just going to be a lot more painful later, a lot more impactful later. So it's unfortunate, but like Anna said, it's a business decision. What we can do is to treat every employee with respect and transparency and fairness they deserve. We train our managers to carry out one-on-one conversation with the people and culture team on the side, because it's a very stressful conversation for both the manager as well as the employee to have, and to make sure it's communicated in the most constructive way for both sides. That's really the most critical thing. And once the decision was made, we actually invested into hiring external trainers to bring the best practice into the company, and dedicated a full day of training just to give like all our managers the SOPs and tools they can use to help others and themselves. So that was very, very helpful, and I hope one day we can have a session just talk about best practices in that situation. But I think bottom line is this is not the end of the world. Like how you respond in this situation says more about you and the company than what it actually is.
Next for Leanne, I mean, you did mention about burnout. You personally went through a little bit of burnout during COVID, right? How did that kind of shape the way that you approach that on an organizational level in terms of the kind of HR policies, the kind of things that you want to ensure that your team doesn't experience the same thing that you did during those last 2 years?
Yeah, so for those who don't know the story, 2020 was a really tough time. I think for founders, it was also, I think with times of chaos, there's also a lot of times of opportunity, right? So it was financially, it was the toughest year for She Loves Tech. But we took that opportunity and seized that opportunity. So we also grew and expanded beyond our previous years. So it was this very strange intersection between growing very rapidly, but also financially it being so difficult, right? And at the end of the year, it ended well for us, very well, in fact, but it was, it was a really tough time. I woke up one day and I did not feel great. I was like, I remember it was 2020, it was my birthday, 10th of December. My husband brought me out, and halfway during dinner, I just started tearing, and this is not like me. He's sitting over there. That's not like me. And he was like, honey, what happened, right? And I said, I don't know. And I said, nothing is wrong, actually, but I'm just really not feeling great. And for the next 1.5 months, I wasn't feeling great. It was difficult to get out of bed. It was really difficult. And so that's something, firstly, that I realized I did not want my team to go through. And I didn't want the founders that we impact, that we work with, to go through. And so I became especially protective of my team, right? Making sure that I kept asking them, how are you doing? Because we don't ask that question enough. We don't get that question from our investors, from, the people that we report to. We don't get that question enough.
Every time my investor asks me, how are you doing? It buys me another month. I'm like, oh my God, he cares.
And then we realized that we really need to take care of our team. And actually, so during our offsite, a lot of the things that we're doing is around making sure that we're checking in. We're doing sessions on, positive psychology. We're doing sessions on, getting coaches to come to work with the teams, to work with the founders. And that has become really important to us. And I think we continue to do that. We were one of the first people back in 2018, 2019. We were one of the first people way before the pandemic to do programs on psychology of a founder because we realized that that's what our founders needed. Nobody was doing it. And everything that Sheila's Tech has done, it is out of necessity. Nobody's doing it, so we'll do it. And so we started it and we realized all of our founders here have gone through my session on psychology of a founder, and it was such we don't talk about it enough. They don't get to share it enough. They don't have that community and that safe space to say, hey, actually things are tough and I'm not doing so great, but I don't want people to think that my company is, or I'm not a good founder, or my company is in not a great place, because it is. It's good. But I can admit that sometimes things are not okay.
Okay, Sui Ling, it sounds like the investors are the ones who are the main source of pressure for a lot of founders here. Do you think that is fair?
We have, the person holding the money is always a source of pressure or the source of, help, right? It is true. And I will say this very, very clearly. Your VC is not your friend. Realize that. It's the first thing you have to realize.
Especially
VC,
when things are not going well.
When things are not going well, they will then, it's just like you, the founders will have to streamline and cut jobs, right? It's the same thing. We then have, because we have to answer to our LPs, like, why do you keep, you've got to then focus on the stronger ones and feed them through the winter, right? And then the ones who can't survive, they will have to fend for themselves, essentially. Right? Or realize that they can't survive because the business model is not right. Look, guys, if you are building a business that focuses on solving problems for your customers, you should then have good margins. You should then be able to live another day because you have a real business. And then you don't go crazy spending all the money that your VCs gave you when the times are good. Because remember, it's like a muscle, okay? Figuring out how to be profitable, looking at your unit economics through good times and bad times, that will serve you well.
Yeah, just to add that and something positive, I think this is actually a great time to start a business because your cost of acquisition is going to be low. Nobody's competing with you in terms of keywords. Your cost of hiring is going to be low because there's a pool of talents in the market. You have the room to actually build your execution with precision because in good times, a lot of good is because of market. And now if you can prove your product works, when the market is not so great, you know exactly why it works.
You just need to be a lot more disciplined, right? Because it's very hard to fundraise as an early stage company or with no product market fit because there's a lot of competition for funds, right? I agree, it is a good time to start a business, but you've got to be really good at what you're thinking about doing. It has to be solving a real problem. So there's always money for businesses that are profitable or businesses that are solving real problems. I have a startup right now that is, our round is oversubscribed. It's an A round that is oversubscribed because positive unit economics, capital efficient, and solving an ESG problem. And that's the other thing, ESG is the only place I think where there's a lot more money goes into now than anything else. So think about your business model and your product that can benefit, that come from impact. And I'm sure you guys have been talking about that during this conference.
All right, we are quickly running out of time. So last question for Leanne, just a takeaway for everyone. If, when it comes to, specific resources, help, people that they can go to. I mean, does Juliet Tech have any specific resources that you can recommend for founders out there who may need help?
Definitely. And I think, not everybody was born with backgrounds that allow them to build up that resiliency and that grit very quickly. So resources are so important. And that's also the reason why at She Loves Tech, we really emphasize on the mental health of our founders. We really emphasize on making sure that we check in with them beyond just all of, the normal things that you would see in an entrepreneurial program, but to make sure that we focus on their psychology, on their physical, mental, and emotional health. And that's really important. So we do our Psychology of a Founder programs as well. At the same time, I think it is about creating that source of community. And there's She Loves Tech, there's so many great kind of groups that you can be with. You're not alone. You should not go through this alone. In fact, you would very quickly go under if you continue to go through this alone. So find people to go through this together and, continue to reach out to people. And I think I think it was Sui Ling or somebody's point, Sui Ling's point, which is don't be scared to just put up your hand and say, hey, I need help. Be vocal about it. And I think that's what we don't do enough, just to say, I need help.
All right, everyone, we've come to the end of the panel. Thank you so much for joining us. Can you just give a round of applause to my fellow panelists? Thank you.